He saved 2 Apache sisters in a blizzard. Then their warrior brother came for blood. Every tree was heavy with frost, and the wind howled like a wild animal through the rocky canyons. The sky was gray and heavy, and the sun barely showed itself, hidden behind layers of clouds. Travelers and villagers alike knew that the storm could last for days, and anyone caught in the open risked freezing in minutes. Yet James, a young man in his early 20s, found himself moving through this harsh, unforgiving landscape. He had been traveling for hours, following a narrow trail that wound through the mountains, his boots sinking deep into the fresh snow with every step. James was no stranger to difficult journeys. He had grown up in a small town at the edge of the mountains, learning early how to survive in the wilderness. He knew which plants could be eaten, how to start a fire in damp conditions, and how to navigate by the stars when the sun and landmarks were hidden. But even with all his experience, this storm was unlike anything he had faced before. The snow was falling so heavily that he could barely see a few feet ahead. His fingers were stiff and numb, and every breath seemed to burn his lungs as he pushed forward, determined to find shelter before the night grew darker. As he trudged along the narrow path, he suddenly heard a faint sound that made him stop. It was difficult to distinguish over the roar of the wind, but it sounded like a cry, a small, desperate sound for help. James froze and listened, straining his ears. There it was again, a soft, almost human cry cutting through the wind. His heart raced. He knew that someone could be trapped out here in the middle of the storm, and he could not ignore it. Without thinking twice, he changed his course, moving toward the sound, slipping on the icy rocks and sinking into the snow. The cries led him to a small, rocky outcrop partially hidden by drifts of snow. As he got closer, he could see 2 figures, huddled together, their bodies shivering violently. They were young women, both barely more than girls, their clothing torn and wet from the snow. James could see the fear in their eyes as they looked up at him. They were on the brink of exhaustion, their lips blue and faces pale from the cold. He didn't have time to hesitate. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around the sisters, speaking to them in a calm, steady voice. "It's okay. You're safe now. I'm going to get you out of here." They looked at him with wide, questioning eyes, unsure whether to trust this stranger. But the desperation in their situation left them no choice. James carefully lifted the smaller one into his arms first, feeling the weight of her fragile body against him. Then he helped the older one walk beside him, supporting her as they moved slowly through the deep snow. Every step was a battle. The snow seemed endless, and the wind threatened to push them backward. James focused on each step, on keeping them moving, on keeping them alive. As they walked, he realized how little they had eaten or drunk. Their skin was dry and cracked, and their lips were chapped. Their hair was matted with ice, and their eyes, wide with fear, darted nervously around the mountains. James kept talking to them, trying to distract them from the pain and fear. "Almost there," he said. "Just a little further and we'll find shelter. You have to hold on." He encouraged them with every step, knowing that panic could freeze them where they stood. Hours seemed to pass like minutes as James navigated the mountains. He found a small cave tucked behind a cluster of boulders and decided it would be the safest place to rest for a while. Inside, he cleared the snow and made a small space for them to sit. He built a fire using some dry branches he found nearby, coaxing the flames to life despite the damp wood and icy wind. The sisters huddled together near the warmth, shivering but slowly regaining some color in their faces. James handed them small pieces of food he had in his pack, and they ate in silence, exhausted but relieved. As the fire crackled, James studied the sisters more closely. He noticed the patterns on their clothing, the way they spoke in a language he didn't understand at first. There was something in their eyes, a mix of fear and strength. They were clearly not ordinary travelers. They carried themselves with a quiet dignity, even in the midst of terror. James wondered who they were and how they had ended up in such a dangerous situation. But he knew that questions would have to wait. The immediate concern was keeping them alive and protected from the storm. Outside, the wind continued to howl, battering the cave walls and shaking loose small icicles. Inside, James kept the sisters close to the fire, using blankets to cover them and making sure they stayed warm. He took turns standing guard near the entrance, listening for any signs of danger. Even in the storm, he felt the tension of the unknown. Who were these girls? Were they alone? Was anyone searching for them? Every shadow outside made him alert, every sound made his heart race. The sisters began to relax slowly, their shivering lessening as the warmth seeped into their frozen bodies. One of them whispered something in their language and the other nodded. James couldn't understand the words, but the emotion was clear: gratitude, relief, and a faint glimmer of hope. He smiled reassuringly and nodded back. He felt a deep sense of responsibility. These girls' lives were now in his hands, and he would not let the storm or the mountains take them from him. As night fell, James made a small bed for the sisters and encouraged them to rest. He knew they needed strength for the journey ahead. He stayed awake, staring into the fire, thinking about how fragile life could be in such conditions. The storm outside raged on, but inside the small cave there was a moment of peace. For the first time in hours, the sisters closed their eyes, trusting him completely. James watched them, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. He knew the storm was not the only danger. They had survived the blizzard, but there was a larger world outside that could still pose threats they could not yet see. The night was long, but eventually, the storm's intensity began to lessen. James remained alert, but he allowed himself a brief moment of rest, leaning against the rocks and listening to the soft breathing of the girls. He thought about the courage it had taken for them to survive this long and admired their resilience. Despite being lost and alone in the blizzard, they had not given up. And he too felt a sense of pride, not in heroism, but in simply doing what needed to be done, protecting life when it was most fragile. As dawn approached, the first pale light of morning crept through the cave's entrance. The storm had slowed to a gentle snowfall, and the mountains looked less threatening, almost serene. James gently shook the sisters awake, telling them it was time to move forward to find proper shelter and safety. They obeyed without question, trusting him completely after the long night. Together, they stepped out of the cave, the snow crunching beneath their feet, the wind now calmer but still biting. The journey was far from over, but for now, they had survived the worst. James looked back at the mountains, now glistening under the weak morning sun, and realized that this day had changed everything. He had saved 2 lives, yes, but he had also entered a story much larger than himself. There were questions to answer, challenges to face, and dangers yet to come. But for the moment, he focused on what mattered most, keeping the sisters safe and moving forward, step by step, into the uncertain future. After the long, terrifying night in the blizzard, the sisters began to recover, their strength slowly returning under the warmth of the fire and the protection of James. They moved cautiously now, their eyes constantly scanning the mountains as they walked beside him. Each step was careful, as if they feared the snow might swallow them again. The storm had passed, but the mountains were still dangerous. Jagged rocks jutted out from the snow, and hidden crevices threatened to trip the unwary. James led the way, his hands steady and firm, guiding the sisters over slippery paths and around obstacles. He could sense their exhaustion, but he also noticed a quiet determination in their movements. Despite their fear, they were survivors, and they would not give up easily. As they walked, the sisters began to speak softly to each other in their own language. James listened but could not understand their words. He noticed their expressions, their hand gestures, and the way they glanced at him cautiously. It was clear that they were talking about him, debating whether he could be trusted. James understood their hesitation. After all, he was a stranger who had appeared suddenly in the blizzard, saved their lives, and now led them through unknown territory. Trust would not come easily, yet he did not press them for answers. He knew that in moments like these, actions spoke louder than words. His care, patience, and courage were more important than questions or explanations. Eventually, they stopped at a small clearing where the snow was less deep. James built another fire and handed the sisters some water and a few pieces of bread he had saved. They ate slowly, their hands shaking from the cold, and James watched them carefully. It was then that one of the sisters, the older of the two, began to speak in broken English. Her voice was soft, almost musical, yet filled with a deep sadness. She introduced herself as Naeli and her younger sister as Ahioka. Their names were unusual to James, hinting at a culture and history very different from his own. Naeli began to tell their story, her words hesitant but filled with emotion. She explained that they were from an Apache tribe that lived in the mountains not far from where they had been found. They had been traveling with their family when a violent raid by a rival group had separated them. In the chaos, the sisters had fled, trying to find safety in the wilderness. They had survived on what little food and water they could find, moving quickly to avoid being caught again. Naeli's voice trembled as she spoke of the fear and confusion they had faced, and James could see the truth in her eyes. These girls had endured more in a few days than most people could imagine in a lifetime. Ahioka added her own perspective, her words quieter but no less powerful. She described how cold and hungry they had been, how the snow and wind had seemed endless, and how hope had almost left them entirely. She spoke of the night they had been trapped, how they had thought they would never see another sunrise. James listened, feeling a mix of sorrow and admiration. He realized that their survival was not only a matter of luck, but of courage, resourcefulness, and a will to live that refused to surrender, even in the most hopeless circumstances. As the sisters spoke, James began to understand that their story was far more complex than he had first imagined. They were not simply lost travelers. They were part of a close-knit family bound by tradition, honor, and loyalty. Naeli mentioned their elder brother, a strong and brave man who had always protected them. She spoke of his skill in tracking, his courage in battle, and his deep love for his sisters. But she also spoke of his fierce temper, warning James that he could be dangerous if he found them in the wrong situation. The sisters' words filled James with a sense of unease. He realized that while he had saved their lives from the storm, there was a larger danger approaching, one that no amount of fire, clothing, or care could fully protect them from. The thought of the brother lingered in James' mind as they continued their journey. He could feel the tension in the air, a quiet warning that something significant was about to happen. The sisters occasionally paused to glance behind them, as if listening for sounds beyond the wind. Their alertness reminded James that survival was not just about escaping the storm, but also about avoiding the eyes of those who might see them as intruders or threats. He could sense the weight of responsibility pressing on him. These girls had trusted him, and now he had to ensure that no harm came to them, not from nature, not from people, and not from misunderstandings that might arise from cultural differences. As the day wore on, they reached the edge of a small valley where the snow was lighter, and the trees offered some protection from the wind. James decided to rest here for a while. He built a temporary shelter from branches and covered it with snow to block the chill. The sisters sat close to the fire, warming their hands and slowly regaining strength. Naeli continued her story, sharing memories of their life before the raid. She spoke of the village where they had grown up, the lessons they had learned from their elders, and the traditions that shaped their lives. Every detail painted a picture of a rich and vibrant culture, one that James had never known but now felt a deep respect for. Through their stories, James also began to understand the depth of the sisters' bond. Nayeli and Ahioka had faced the storm together, relying on each other for strength and courage. Their trust in one another had kept them alive, and now they were extending that trust to him. James felt a profound sense of responsibility. He had always considered himself capable and prepared for danger, but this situation required more than skill. It required empathy, patience, and an understanding of the human spirit. The sisters had survived the storm physically, but the emotional scars of their journey were still present, and he knew that true safety meant protecting both body and spirit. The sisters spoke of their brother again, their voices tinged with both love and fear. Nayeli explained that he was not only a protector, but also a warrior trained in the ways of their people. He would track them if necessary and ensure their safety, but he would also defend their honor at all costs. The sisters did not want conflict, but they could not hide the truth. Their brother would be coming, and James needed to understand that. This revelation made James realize that the story was no longer just about survival in the snow. It was about navigating a delicate balance of trust, honor, and respect. Any misstep could have serious consequences, and he had to be cautious in every action and word. As the afternoon passed, James noticed that the sisters grew quieter, their eyes scanning the horizon more frequently. Something unspoken was in the air, a tension that even the calm valley could not dispel. He felt it too, the sense that time was limited and that danger, though not yet visible, was approaching. He stayed alert, watching for signs of movement in the trees, tracks in the snow, or any sound that could signal someone was nearby. The mountains had been their enemy during the storm, but now they were also a silent witness to the unfolding story, a story in which every decision mattered, every step carried weight. By evening, the valley began to darken and the temperature dropped sharply. James made another small fire and urged the sisters to rest. He kept watch, reflecting on what he had learned. These girls had endured incredible hardship, and their lives were intertwined with forces far larger than the blizzard itself. He understood that saving them had been only the first step. The next challenge would be even more complex. It was no longer just about survival. It was about navigating honor, tradition, and the arrival of a protector whose reputation alone could strike fear into anyone who opposed him. As night fell, James felt a mixture of pride, anxiety, and determination. He had brought the sisters through the storm, kept them alive, and earned their trust. But he knew that the story was far from over. Their journey had only just begun, and the arrival of their warrior brother would change everything. The wind continued to whisper through the valley, carrying with it a sense of inevitability. James could feel it in his bones. Soon, someone would arrive, and he would have to prove not just his skill, but his courage, honor, and respect for the family he had helped save. The sisters huddled near the fire, exhausted but grateful, while James prepared for whatever lay ahead. The first part of their journey had been a test of survival, and they had passed. The next part would test something deeper, their trust in each other, their courage in the face of confrontation, and their ability to navigate a world where honor and tradition could be as dangerous as any storm. James knew that the coming hours would be crucial, and he steeled himself for what was to come. The snow-covered mountains, once an enemy, now held the promise of new challenges, and the story of survival was about to become a story of courage, respect, and the meeting of worlds. The snow had begun to settle, leaving a quiet calm across the valley, but the calm was deceptive. Far above the tree line, hidden in the shadows of the mountains, a figure moved with purpose and skill. He was tall, strong, and every step he took was careful and deliberate. His eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the white landscape for any sign of movement. This was no ordinary traveler. He was a warrior, a protector of his people, and the elder brother of the two girls James had saved. His name was Takoda, and he had been tracking his sisters ever since they had been separated from the tribe. Takoda knew these mountains intimately. He had grown up climbing the cliffs, running through the forests, and following the trails that twisted like veins through the snow. The storm had been a challenge, but he was not deterred. He could read the signs of life in the snow: footprints, broken branches, faint traces of heat from a fire. Every detail told him where his sisters might be. He moved silently, almost like a shadow, leaving no trace of his passage. His mind was focused, not only on the safety of his sisters, but also on the person who had intervened in their fate. Meanwhile, James and the sisters continued their cautious journey through the valley. They had managed to build a temporary shelter and start a small fire, giving themselves a chance to rest and regain strength. The sisters were still shaken from the storm, but they trusted James now. Nayeli and Ahioka sat close to him, warming their hands and speaking in quiet whispers to each other. They had shared what they could of their story, but they remained cautious, aware that their brother might arrive at any moment. James noticed the change in their expressions, a mixture of relief and tension, and he understood that something significant was approaching. As the day wore on, the sound of crunching snow reached James' ears, faint at first, almost imperceptible. He froze, his senses sharpening. "Do you hear that?" he asked the sisters. They nodded, their eyes wide, scanning the tree line. The sound grew louder, rhythmic and purposeful, like someone moving with confidence across the snow. James crouched near the fire, thinking quickly. He had no weapons, only his survival skills and the determination to protect these girls. Whoever was coming, he needed to be ready. Takoda moved closer, carefully avoiding any loose snow that might give him away. He had tracked the girls through the blizzard, following every mark they left behind. His heart raced, not with anger but with worry. He had been taught that a protector's duty was to ensure the safety of family at all costs. Now he was close enough to see the faint plume of smoke from their fire, a sign that his sisters had survived the storm. Relief washed over him briefly, but it was quickly replaced by a sharp edge of caution. He could sense that an outsider was with them, someone who had interfered in his sister's fate. He would need to understand their intentions before deciding whether they were a friend or a threat. From his position, Takoda observed the stranger. James was taller than expected, with a steady posture that suggested confidence and skill. He moved gently around the sisters, tending to the fire and offering them food. Takoda's initial suspicion began to soften as he watched the way James interacted with the girls. There was care in his movements, patience in his gestures, and a calmness in his voice that spoke of honesty. Yet, Takoda's instincts told him to remain cautious. Even the kindest actions could hide dangerous intentions. Finally, Takoda stepped into view, the crunch of snow announcing his presence. James immediately noticed the figure, standing tall against the snowy backdrop. He instinctively moved in front of the sisters, placing himself between them and the newcomer. "Who are you?" James called, his voice firm but not threatening. Takoda stopped a few feet away, his eyes locked on the girls, then on James. He spoke in a low, measured tone. "I am Takoda, their brother. I have come to take them home." The sisters' eyes widened, relief and fear mixing in their expressions. Nayeli whispered, "Brother," and instinctively moved closer to James. Ahioka clung to Nayeli, her small hands trembling. James realized the situation was far more delicate than he had anticipated. This was not a simple misunderstanding. This was a man who had trained his whole life to protect his family, and now he was standing before him, assessing every movement. Takoda studied James carefully, his gaze sharp and unwavering. "You found them in the storm," he said, "and you brought them here." His voice was calm but carried a weight of authority. James nodded, understanding the unspoken challenge. "Yes, I saved them because they were in danger. I did not know who they were or where they came from. I only wanted to help." Takoda's eyes never left his sister's, but he could see the sincerity in James' posture, the honesty in his tone. There was a long silence, the kind that stretches in the cold air, filled only by the crackling of the fire and the distant whisper of the wind through the trees. Takoda's mind raced as he weighed his next move. He had always been taught to protect his sisters, to ensure their safety above all else. He had trained for this moment, preparing for any situation in which someone might threaten them. Yet, everything he observed suggested that James was not a threat. There was bravery in saving lives in such a storm, but there was also respect and humility, qualities that Takoda valued deeply. The sisters, sensing the tension, began to speak softly. Naeli stepped forward slightly. "Brother, he saved us," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "He kept us alive when we had nothing, when the storm might have taken us. Please, you must see that he means no harm." Ahioka nodded beside her, her eyes wide and trusting. Takoda's expression softened, the sharp edges of suspicion giving way to a cautious hope. He could see the truth in their words, the gratitude in their eyes. Yet he could not ignore his instincts entirely. James took a step forward, keeping his hands visible to show he meant no harm. "I only helped because it was the right thing to do," he said quietly. "I did not interfere with your family or your people. I only wanted to save lives." Takoda's eyes met his, searching for deception but found none. The calm determination in James' eyes mirrored his own values: courage, respect, and honor. Takoda realized that this stranger was not an enemy, but a man who had acted with the best intentions, even in the face of danger. Despite this understanding, the tension remained. Takoda knew that trust could not be given lightly. Actions mattered more than words. He slowly approached the fire, keeping his focus on James, then the sisters. Every movement was deliberate, careful, as if testing the waters. James remained calm, his posture relaxed but ready, knowing that any sudden movement could trigger conflict. The sisters watched in awe, witnessing a delicate dance of caution, respect, and understanding unfold between two very different men. Finally, Takoda spoke, his voice softening. "You saved them," he said, "and for that I cannot punish you. But know this, I will always protect them, and any threat to their safety will be met with action. I need to see that you understand that." James nodded solemnly. "I understand completely. Their safety is my priority, and I will not put them at risk. I only wish to help." The sisters, now sitting quietly, breathed a collective sigh of relief. The immediate danger had passed, replaced by a fragile but growing trust. For the next hour, the three men, James, Takoda, and the silent tension of the mountains, remained near the fire. Words were few, but meaning was clear. Each man had demonstrated courage, respect, and understanding. The sisters, though exhausted, felt safe for the first time since the storm. Takoda realized that this stranger, though from a different world, shared the values he had been taught: protection, honor, and bravery. And James, in turn, had gained insight into the depth of family bonds, loyalty, and the unspoken strength of those who endure hardship together. As the night approached, Takoda decided to let James remain with the sisters until the storm had fully passed and the path back to their tribe was clear. He would not leave their side entirely, but he would oversee their safety, ensuring that nothing threatened them. James agreed, grateful for the understanding and careful to respect Takoda's authority as the protector of the sisters. In that quiet moment, amid the snow and the shadows of the mountains, a delicate balance was achieved, one built on courage, trust, and mutual respect. The blizzard had tested them all, revealing the strength of the human spirit in the face of extreme adversity. But the arrival of Takoda had introduced a new challenge, one of understanding, respect, and the delicate navigation of honor. James had saved lives, but now he had to prove that he could act with honor and respect toward the warrior brother. Takoda had found his sisters alive, but he had also witnessed the bravery of a stranger who had acted without fear or selfishness. Both men understood that the coming days would require cooperation, patience, and courage beyond anything they had faced in the storm. In the quiet of the mountains, near the fading fire, the sisters slept peacefully for the first time in days. James and Takoda remained awake, each lost in thought. The tension had eased, but the bond of trust was still new, fragile, and precious. They both understood that the true test was not over. The journey back to the tribe, the challenges ahead, and the lessons of courage and respect had only just begun. And in that moment, under the cold stars and snow-laden trees, a story of survival, bravery, and honor had been written, one that would echo in the mountains long after the storm had passed. The morning light broke slowly over the snow-covered mountains, painting the world in shades of white and silver. The storm had passed, but the cold remained sharp, biting at exposed skin and making every movement a careful task. James awoke to the faint sound of Takoda speaking to the sisters. He peeked out from the shelter and saw the warrior kneeling beside Naeli and Ahioka, checking their blankets and offering them small pieces of food. The sisters were calmer now, but their eyes still held a quiet wariness, a reminder of the dangers they had faced and those that might still come. James rose carefully, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace. He had learned much in the hours since Takoda had arrived. The warrior had observed him closely during the confrontation the night before, and while there had been tension, there was also respect. James realized that survival was no longer just about navigating snow and mountains. It was also about navigating relationships, understanding the values and traditions of others, and proving through action that he could be trusted. The group had to continue moving. Takoda explained that the tribe was several miles away, beyond the ridge of mountains that stretched like a white wall before them. The path was treacherous, even without the storm, and now the snow had added a layer of difficulty. Rocks were hidden beneath fresh drifts, ice patches were concealed under powdery white layers, and the cold sapped strength from muscles and bones alike. Takoda took the lead, using his knowledge of the terrain to find the safest path. James followed closely, supporting the sisters whenever necessary, carrying supplies and offering his strength whenever their energy faltered. The sisters moved cautiously, their eyes scanning every tree line and shadow. Naeli held Ahioka's hand tightly, whispering encouragement. James noticed how the sisters communicated without words, understanding each other in ways he could not fully grasp. He realized that they had grown up in a world where vigilance was survival, where trust had to be earned, and where every step could hold danger. Takoda moved alongside them, his presence both protective and commanding, showing them that they were safe while also teaching James how to navigate the mountains with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime in their shadow. The journey was long and exhausting. Each step through the deep snow required focus, and the group had to stop frequently to rest. During these pauses, Takoda shared stories of his youth with the tribe, teaching James lessons about endurance, patience, and the importance of respect for nature. James listened intently, realizing that survival was not only about physical skill, but also about understanding the world around him and the people who inhabited it. The warrior spoke of tracking, reading the signs in the snow, predicting weather changes, and noticing subtle cues in the environment. Each lesson was a reminder that the mountains were alive, and those who respected them could survive. The sisters began to regain some of their strength. Naeli spoke softly to James, thanking him for saving their lives. Ahioka, still quiet, offered a shy smile. The sisters' gratitude was tempered by their cautious awareness of Takoda's presence, but it was clear that they were beginning to feel safe. James felt a sense of pride, not in himself, but in the fact that he could provide some comfort and security to these girls who had faced so much. He knew that every small victory, helping them eat, keeping them warm, guiding them through dangerous paths, was significant. The first real challenge came as they approached a narrow pass between two cliffs. The snow here was particularly deep, and the wind funneled through the gap, making each step a battle. Takoda led the way, testing the footing carefully before signaling the others to follow. James helped the sisters step cautiously, holding Ahioka's hand and supporting Naeli when her boots slipped on a hidden patch of ice. The wind howled, carrying loose snow into their faces, making it difficult to see. James pressed forward, focused on each movement, knowing that one mistake could lead to injury or worse. As they emerged from the pass, they encountered a frozen river. The ice was thick but uneven, and crossing it would require careful balance. Takoda examined it, tapping and listening, then gestured for James to follow. Together, they guided the sisters across, testing each step before allowing them to place their weight. The sisters moved slowly, trusting James and Takoda to keep them safe. For James, the experience was exhausting, but he found a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he was making a difference. The challenge of nature had become a shared journey, each step a test of courage, skill, and cooperation. The days passed in a rhythm of movement, rest, and learning. Takoda taught James how to identify safe paths, how to read the subtle signs of the mountains, and how to respect the land that could both sustain and harm. The sisters, too, began to relax, feeling the security of James' protection and Takoda's watchful eye. They shared stories of their tribe, of customs, and of lessons passed down through generations. James listened with fascination, realizing how much he had to learn about resilience, courage, and the power of family bonds. Despite the harsh conditions, moments of laughter and lightness began to emerge. Ahioka tripped on a hidden rock and James caught her just in time, causing her to giggle despite the cold. Naeli smiled, teasing James gently about his clumsiness. Takoda observed with quiet approval, recognizing the importance of morale and emotional strength in a journey that was physically demanding. James realized that survival was as much about keeping spirits strong as it was about keeping bodies alive. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold, they made camp near a stand of pine trees. Takoda instructed James on how to gather wood and build a more secure shelter. The sisters helped as best they could, carrying small branches and arranging blankets. The teamwork created a sense of unity among them. For the first time since the storm, James felt that they were not just surviving, they were overcoming. Each small task completed together strengthened their bond and built mutual respect. During the night, the cold became intense, but Takoda remained vigilant, checking the fire and the surroundings. James took turns with him, keeping watch over the sleeping sisters. The quiet of the mountains was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of an animal or the sigh of wind through the trees. James reflected on how far they had come, from the blizzard that had almost taken the sisters' lives to this moment, where survival required not only courage but also wisdom, patience, and cooperation. The following day brought another test. A sudden snowfall had hidden their path, and they had to rely on Takoda's tracking skills. Every footprint, every broken twig, every mark in the snow was a clue. James learned to observe, to anticipate, to move with care. He helped the sisters follow safely, explaining what he had learned, and they listened attentively, absorbing both the knowledge and the reassurance that they were in capable hands. Each successful navigation of the mountains strengthened their confidence and built trust among all of them. By the end of the fourth day, the group had made significant progress. The mountains still loomed, but the journey had revealed the strength, resilience, and cooperation of everyone involved. Takoda acknowledged James' bravery and dedication, seeing in him not just a rescuer but a partner in ensuring the sisters' safety. James, in turn, gained deep respect for Takoda's skills, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to his family. The sisters, growing stronger each day, showed gratitude and trust that had once seemed impossible in the wake of the blizzard. As they paused to rest in a small clearing, Takoda spoke quietly to James. "You have proven yourself," he said. "You care for them and your courage is true. I will trust you to continue with us, but remember, protection is not only about strength. It is about patience, understanding, and respect." James nodded, understanding the depth of his words. He had learned that bravery alone was not enough. True protection required wisdom, empathy, and the ability to work alongside others, even when they came from worlds very different from his own. The sisters, listening nearby, felt a renewed sense of hope. Their journey through the mountains had been perilous, but with James and Takoda together, they had survived challenges that seemed impossible. Each obstacle they overcame, deep snow, icy rivers, hidden rocks, was a victory, a reminder of their own strength and the care of those who protected them. They began to talk more openly, sharing small stories, laughing quietly, and regaining a sense of normalcy in the midst of the harsh wilderness. By the time the sun began to set, they had found a safe place to rest for the night. The sky was painted with shades of orange and purple, and the mountains glowed softly in the fading light. James, Takoda, Naeli, and Ahioka sat together, eating a simple meal, warming themselves by the fire. There was a quiet satisfaction in the air, a sense that they had faced the mountains, the snow, and the uncertainty of life together and emerged stronger. Each small victory had built trust, respect, and courage, creating a bond that could not be broken easily. The night was cold, but for the first time in days the sisters slept peacefully. James and Takoda remained awake for a while, keeping watch and reflecting on the journey so far. The mountains had tested them, the storm had challenged them, and yet they had endured. They understood that the road ahead would still have obstacles, but now they faced it together, strengthened by courage, cooperation, and mutual respect. And in that quiet moment, under the snow-laden trees and the clear night sky, they all knew that they had grown, not just in strength, but in trust, wisdom, and the ability to face whatever came next. The morning dawned crisp and bright over the mountains, the snow sparkling under the soft light of the sun. The storm that had threatened their lives was long gone, leaving the world silent except for the occasional rustle of trees and the distant call of birds. James, Takoda, Naeli, and Ahioka had continued their journey steadily, moving carefully across the snow and ice, their eyes alert but their spirits lighter than they had been in days. After the long trek, the distant outline of their tribe's village appeared on the horizon, nestled in a sheltered valley surrounded by mountains. Relief and anticipation filled the air. For the sisters, the sight of their village was like a dream. Naeli and Ahioka's steps grew quicker, their fatigue momentarily forgotten. Naeli whispered softly, almost to herself, "We're home, finally." Ahioka clutched her sister's hand, her eyes wide with excitement and joy. James smiled, feeling the same sense of relief. They had survived the storm, the harsh mountains, and the uncertainty of the wilderness, and now the safety of home was within reach. Takoda's expression softened too, pride and relief shining in his eyes. His sisters were safe, and they were about to be reunited with their family. As they approached the village, Takoda signaled James to step back slightly. Respect and tradition dictated the final approach. James understood immediately. Takoda would take the lead as the protector of his sisters. He watched as Takoda called out softly, announcing their arrival. From the trees and behind the small huts, figures began to emerge, tribal elders, relatives, and other members of the village. Their faces were filled with surprise, then joy, as they saw the sisters alive and well. The reunion was emotional. Families rushed forward, embracing Naeli and Ahioka, their tears of relief glistening in the sunlight. James stayed back, observing quietly, understanding his role. He had saved the sisters' lives, but he had also learned to respect their culture, their family, and the bond between siblings. Takoda approached him, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "You have done well," he said quietly. "You saved my sisters, and for that I am grateful. You have my respect." James nodded, feeling a deep sense of honor. The journey had been dangerous, exhausting, and challenging, but in this moment it all felt worthwhile. The elders of the tribe stepped forward, examining James carefully. They spoke among themselves in their language, then addressed him in broken English, thanking him for saving the girls. James bowed slightly, humility in his posture. "I only did what I could," he said. "Their lives were in danger, and I could not leave them to face the storm alone." The elders nodded, their expressions serious but respectful. In their eyes, he could see that they understood courage and honor, even when it came from someone outside their tribe. The sisters, still holding hands, looked up at James. Naomi smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. "You kept us alive. We will never forget this." Ahioka nodded, her small hand brushing against his arm. "Thank you," she whispered. James felt a lump in his throat. Words could not fully express the relief, joy, and pride he felt. He had faced snow, ice, and fear to protect them, and now he could see the happiness his actions had brought. As the group entered the village, Takoda guided them to a small hut where the sisters could rest and recover fully. James and Takoda spoke privately for a moment. "You have proven yourself," Takoda said again, "not only in courage but in understanding. You have shown patience, respect, and care. That is why you are welcome here." James nodded, feeling the weight of the words. It was not only bravery that mattered, it was honor, humility, and respect for others that defined true heroism. The village welcomed them warmly. Fires were lit, food was prepared, and the sisters were given clean blankets and warm clothing. Stories of the rescue spread quickly, and soon the elders and other villagers gathered to hear the tale. James recounted the events simply, emphasizing the courage and resilience of the sisters. He spoke of the blizzard, the mountains, and the dangers they had faced, highlighting the strength it took for them to survive. The villagers listened in awe, nodding in appreciation of both James' bravery and the sisters' endurance. Takoda stood nearby, observing quietly, proud of the way everyone had acted. He knew that his sisters had been in capable hands and that James had earned their trust. The warrior had also witnessed James' dedication to protecting life, even in the harshest conditions. This experience had created a bond between them that went beyond words, a mutual respect rooted in courage, honor, and shared experience. The sisters, now safe, began to regain their energy and spirits, playing quietly with children nearby and laughing softly, their fear from the storm fading into memory. In the evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting a warm glow over the village, James sat by a fire with Takoda. They spoke of the journey, of lessons learned, and of the strength required to face life's challenges. "You were brave," Takoda said. "But more than that, you were patient and respectful. That is what saved them, not only your actions but your understanding of what it meant to protect." James nodded, reflecting on the journey. "I have learned much from you," he said. "About courage, about responsibility, and about the importance of respecting others' lives and traditions." The sisters joined them, bringing warmth and light to the conversation. Naomi spoke softly. "I thought we would never survive the blizzard. But you saved us and you both kept us safe." Ahioka nodded, her eyes bright. "We will remember this always. You are part of our story now." James smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment and gratitude. This journey had tested him in every way, physically, mentally, and emotionally. But it had also taught him the value of compassion, courage, and trust. As night fell, the village grew quiet, and the stars shone brightly over the snow-covered mountains. James watched the sisters sleeping peacefully, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. He had faced danger and fear, and through courage, patience, and respect, he had saved lives. Takoda stood nearby, his presence strong and protective, yet there was also a softness in his gaze. The warrior had seen the bravery in James, and in that recognition a bond had formed, a bond that would endure beyond the mountains, the storm, and the peril they had faced together. In the days that followed, the sisters fully recovered. They shared their experiences with the tribe, telling stories of survival, courage, and the kindness of a stranger who had saved them. James remained in the village for a short while, learning more about their customs, listening to the elders, and observing the strength and resilience of the community. Every day reinforced the lessons he had learned. That bravery was not just about action, but also about care. That courage required respect for life and for others, and that trust and understanding could bridge worlds, even those divided by culture, language, and experience. Before leaving the village to continue his journey elsewhere, James stood at the edge of the settlement, looking out at the mountains that had tested him and the people who had taught him so much. Takoda approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Go with honor," he said. "You have proven yourself a true protector. Remember what you have learned here and carry it wherever you go." James nodded, feeling the weight and the warmth of those words. He knew that this experience would stay with him forever, shaping the person he would become and the way he would face challenges in the future. As he began his descent from the mountains, the wind now gentle and the snow firm underfoot, James reflected on the journey. He had entered the storm as a stranger, faced danger, and emerged having saved lives and learned invaluable lessons. The sisters had been rescued, the warrior brother's honor preserved, and a story of courage, respect, and survival had been written in the snow of the mountains. Every step forward was a reminder that one act of bravery could change lives, that understanding and respect could prevent conflict, and that the human spirit, when guided by compassion and courage, could overcome even the most formidable challenges. The mountain stood silent behind him, white and beautiful, holding memories of snowstorms, fear, hope, and courage. James walked on, carrying with him the story of two sisters saved from the blizzard, the warrior brother who demanded respect and honor, and the bond formed through courage and understanding. The world ahead was unknown, but he felt ready, strengthened by the journey, by the trust placed in him, and by the lives he had helped protect. And in that quiet, snowy landscape, he knew that the lessons of the mountains, the storm, and the people he had met would guide him forever.